And welcome to KRAD COVID Readings. I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido, presenting Trek Tuesday to make your pandemic palatable. I'm continuing to read from my Star Trek Starfleet Corps of Engineers novelettes that I wrote over the years between 2000 and 2006. We are continuing with now part 3 of Fatal Error. Before I do that, I want to remind you that I have a Patreon, which you should totally support because it's awesome. There are monthly movie reviews, several TV reviews a month, anywhere between 1 and 5 TV reviews a month, depending on the month. Regular cat pictures, not quite daily, but pretty close. Weekly excerpts from my works in progress, and vignettes featuring my original characters, Cassie Zukov, the Dragon Precinct series, the Super City Cop series, the Braun Gold series, and so on. And also first looks at my first drafts as they're completed. How many of those things you get depends on what tier you are. It's anywhere between $1 a month and $20 a month. So even the most expensive tier is dirt cheap. And so if you want to try that, please check it out. Patreon.com/KRAD, K-R-A-D. Just like KRAD COVID Readings. Anyway, we now continue with the third part of Fatal Error, in which the U.S.S. Vinci crew is trying very hard to fix a very large computer. Chapter 6. Domenica Corsi shot Drew a look. Drew nodded, closed his eyes, and covered Hawkins' eyes as well. Grabbing the grenade from her belt, she thumbed it on, tossed it into the crowd of advancing Eerlik, and closed her eyes. She could see the brightness of the photonic grenade even through her eyelids. As soon as the lights dimmed, she opened her eyes and saw exactly what she'd hoped. A dozen Eerlik blinking furiously, temporarily blinded. Of course, Gomez and 110 were similarly blinded, since Corsi couldn't warn them about the grenade without warning their attackers, but that wasn't an insurmountable problem. "Come on!" she cried. Slinging her phaser rifle behind her shoulder, she grabbed Gomez and 110 by the arm and quickly led them out of the area. Drew led the wounded Hawkins. Thankfully, Hawkins wasn't hit in the leg. "I am all right," 110 said as he gently shrugged out of Corsi's grip and dashed ahead. Guess Minars aren't sensitive to bright light, she thought. "What happened?" Gomez started, but Corsi cut her off as she led the commander around a corner. "Photonic grenade. Keep moving, Commander." Gomez nodded, blinking furiously as she picked up the pace, trusting Corsi not to let her walk into a wall. With a hand that wasn't guiding Gomez, Corsi held her tricorder, currently showing her a map of the caverns. She led the way with Gomez, 110 right behind, and Drew leading Hawkins behind him. Corsi moved as fast as she could without losing the others. The display also showed that the 12 Eerlik hadn't moved from the terminal chamber. No, wait, she thought as the display changed. Now they're moving and spreading out in what looks like a search pattern, which means they have no clue which way we went. Good. She led the team around a few more corners and then finally into a small cul-de-sac. Like the main terminal area, the walls here looked like big slabs of marble, but these were covered in dust. According to the records in the mission profile, there used to be a terminal here, but it had been consolidated into another unit. Although the lights had remained on in much of the complex, they'd apparently been removed from this area. The only illumination was provided by the wrist lamps and whatever light was coming from that corridor. Switching hers off, Corsi said, "Everyone kill the wrist lamps. I don't think they have any scanning equipment, so they'll be searching by sight." 110 walked up to Gomez. "Are you all right, Commander?" "Yeah, I'm okay," Gomez said, blinking furiously. "This dim cavern is actually helping." Letting out a breath, she said, "Let's get the hell out of here." She tapped her comm badge. "Gomez to Da Vinci, 5 to beam up." Silence answered. "Oh, hell," Corsi thought. She tapped her own comm badge. "Corsi to Da Vinci." Gomez immediately whipped out her tricorder. "The comm badges are functioning normally, and there's no security measure of Ganitriul's interfering, which means that Da Vinci can't answer." Shaking her head, Corsi said, "That fits. We were ambushed. They probably were too. If they're not answering, we know what it means, Commander." Gomez said quickly, "Right now, let's focus on what we can do." Corsi nodded. Gomez was right, actually. "Drew, stand guard." Drew nodded, gave Hawkins a quick, encouraging look, then headed out of to the mouth of the cul-de-sac. Corsi knelt down to check on Hawkins. Conveniently, Hawkins himself had been carrying the mini medikit. She opened it and treated his wound as best she could. It would do until they got back to the Da Vinci. If they got back. "We need to figure out how to proceed with the mission." Looking up sharply at Gomez, who looked rather sinister with the light from the tricorder shining up on her face, casting odd shadows on her pale complexion, Corsi said, "Commander, I don't think we should be proceeding anywhere. We're actually in a defensible position right now. There's 12 armed Eerlik out there, and all we've got are phaser rifles that are basically glorified clubs thanks to our friend the computer, who's already lied to us." I have not lied to you intentionally, Lieutenant Commander Corsi. The voice of Ganitriul startled Corsi, and she got to her feet and raised her phaser rifle on instinct. Gomez, however, didn't look at all surprised, as if disembodied voices spoke without prompting to her all the time. You told us there were sensor ghosts that Drew picked up, Ganitriul. I believe that they were, just as I believe that the current running through my data port was safe for 110. There was an error in both cases. It is not something I am accustomed to, but it has become a regular occurrence since this invasive program was placed within me. I also know what has happened to your ship. Are they okay? Gomez asked, sounding concerned. They were attacked by a Pevni ship. For some reason, the Pevni have constructed a vessel that is beyond my control. This is in direct violation of Eerlik law. The first speaker is on the vessel, as is one of the clergy. Unfortunately, I was unable to maintain contact with either ship, so I do not know what precipitated the conflict. Captain Gold and First Speaker Ansett were discussing working together amiably when I lost contact. The Pevni ship opened fire moments later. I am unable to detect the Da Vinci any longer. What about the Pevni ship? Gomez asked. It is still in orbit, but damaged. Corsi gritted her teeth. She didn't like the sound of this at all. Of course, the Da Vinci could just have been off Ganitriul's sensors, or those same sensors could have misinformed Ganitriul. Or, she thought with a sigh, the damn computer could be lying to us. No matter what, though, the away team was on its own. Gomez turned to the Binar. 110, you said there may be a way to remove the invasive program? Yes, there is. It is possible that I can remove it, but I would need access to Ganitriul's central core. Even then, I am not sure that I am capable of performing the programming necessary to fix Ganitriul. If 111 were here... He trailed off. His voice trailed off. Corsi rolled her eyes. The core is at least a kilometer's walk from here, and it's sealed in a large bunker with a computer lock. With the security system on the fritz... Actually, Lieutenant Commander Corsi, the systems that lock and seal the computer core are independent of my systems. It was a precaution against precisely this kind of malfunction. That lock will open and close as normal with the proper codes, which I will provide. Gomez smiled. It's good planning. Unimpressed, Corsi said, that still doesn't change the fact that it's a kilometer from here to there. And I'm willing to bet there are all kinds of entertaining little security measures that you don't have control over, right, Ganitriul? That is true. I can do my best to guide you, but my control is limited. Commander, there are only 5 of us, and one of us is injured. We don't have any weapons aside from 3 more photonic grenades, and those are only good for a fancy light show. We're not likely to get reinforcements anytime soon, if ever. There are 12 people out there with big swords who are trying to kill us. We're better off staying here. Maybe we are, Gomez said, but Eerlik isn't. Remember what Carol told us? The longer we take to fix Ganitriul, the worse off Eerlik is. The people hunting us are Eerlik, Commander. Their leader was on that ship that fired on the Da Vinci. Maybe they don't want our help. Maybe not, Gomez said calmly and confidently, but until I know that for sure, we have a mission to perform, and we can only perform it at the core. Gomez was half a meter shorter than Corsi and significantly smaller in build. And yet, anyone walking into the cul-de-sac at that moment would know exactly who was in charge, and it wasn't Domenica Corsi. The security chief had raised her objections, and they had been responded to. Not the way she would have liked, but that was the way things worked. Whatever you say, sir, she said, but I can guarantee you that things will go wrong. At that, Gomez actually smiled. Things didn't go wrong, Commander. The galaxy wouldn't need engineers. She then looked up. Ganitriul, are you using a scattering field to jam the weapons? Yes, it is an automatic feature whenever unauthorized weapons fire is registered. Normally it can only be deactivated by one of the clergy or someone with sufficient clearance. However, I cannot guarantee that it will last. Gomez consulted her tricorder. Here it is. Security measure 7? Correct. She studied the tricorder for a minute. Unable to stand the silence that followed, Corsi finally said, What are you doing, Commander? Looking over the schematics of the scattering field. If I'm right, I can adjust the phaser rifle so they can function anyway. When I was on the Sentinel during the war, we pulled this trick on a Bream platoon that had tried to jam our hand weapons. Ganitriul's scattering field has a similar design. We'll only be able to get as high as light stun, but we can do it. She closed the tricorder. Here's the plan. Drew will continue to keep watch. 110, you keep an eye on Hawkins, make sure he doesn't get any worse. Corsi, go over the map, find us the best route from here to the core. Ganitriul, if there's anything you can do to distract our pursuers, it would be greatly appreciated. I can make no promises, but I will do my best. Thanks. I'm going to modify the phasers. Shouldn't take more than 15 minutes. You have your orders, people. Get to work. Sighing, Corsi handed Gomez her rifle, then opened her tricorder. She had a bad feeling about this, but she couldn't fault Gomez either. She was finishing the mission she was given, which was ultimately the right thing to do. I just hope we live to tell Gold's great-grandkids about it. Yes, well, we were afraid of something like this. Now, Armorer. Alarm bells went off in David Gold's head at the priest's words. He turned to Lieutenant McCallan in tactical and started to say shields up, but he couldn't get the words out before some kind of weapons fire struck the Da Vinci. Shields up! Red alert! He was able to say this time, as the alarm started ringing out around the bridge. He also saw the priest stab the first speaker and watched her crumple to the deck. There's a hell of a lot more going on here than we thought. I should live long enough to find out what exactly. Return fire! Phaser controls aren't responding, McCallan said. Arming torpedoes. Pounding a fist on the console, he added, I can't get a lock! They're taking evasive action, said Ensign Wong from the con position. Pursue them, Gold said. McCallan, target manually. Use a damn scope sight if you have to, but target that ship. Yes, sir. Damage report. Duffy's voice sounded over the intercom from engineering. I don't know what kind of weapon they're using, sir, but it took out half our tactical systems. Shields are fine, but phaser controls are shot to hell and the targeting systems are offline. That much I knew. Can you fix it? Working on it. Gold thought a moment. They had someone on board who probably knew as much about repairing battle damage on the fly as anyone. Gold to LaForge. Get down to engineering and help Duffy out, Commander. Already on my way, Captain. Good. Turning to the tactical station behind him, Gold said, McCallan, any news? I can't target them unless we get within 30,000 kilometers. Can you close the gap, Wong? Working on it, sir, said the young ensign. That ship's as fast as we are at impulse. From Ops, Lieutenant Ina said, They're firing again, sir. After the impact, McCallan said with surprise, Shields down! Sir, I don't know what they did, but shields are completely gone. Captain, I can get the shields back online, but you've got to give me 10 minutes. That was LaForge. They're firing again, Ina said. Veer off! Wong, give us distance! Sparks flew as the weapons fire struck the unshielded ship. Stevens to bridge. Sir, if you set course for the second planet in the system and maintain a low orbit, we won't be picked up by their sensors. You heard the man, Wong. Set course for the second planet. Full impulse. Yes, sir. McCallan, full spread of torpedoes. Doesn't matter where they're aimed, they're just cover fire. Nodding, McCallan said, Torpedoes away. Go, Wong. Engaging at full impulse. They're following? Gold asked. No, sir, said Ina. They did take some heavy damage, though. McCallan smiled. Guess my aim was true. We should be so lucky, Gold muttered. The Bajoran ops officer continued. They're setting course back for the moon. All right, give us a low orbit and keep an eye on them, Wong. Yes, sir. Getting up from his chair, the captain said, Gold to S.C.E. Briefing room, 5 minutes. McCallan, you got the bridge. Contact the Sugihara and tell them to get over here pronto. And the nanosecond something happens, let me know. Got it? Got it, sir. Good. He headed toward the briefing room, wondering how the hell the mission had managed to go so bad, so fast. And why exactly one of the Eerlik clergy had killed the first speaker in cold blood. Where are they? Undlar bellowed. Couldn't believe it. They had the Starfleet ship and now it was gone. Scanners aren't picking them up anywhere, the pilot said. Well, maybe they blew up, Undlar said, though that was wishful thinking. And then we'd be reading debris. There isn't anything. Undlar slammed his fist into a bulkhead. It had been going so well. The pilot continued to lean over his readout. Next to him, Imara turned to look at Undlar. I can't believe you killed the first speaker. She was in the way. You never told me you were going to kill her, especially not on my ship. Laughing, Undlar said, What did you think I was going to do, Imara? Ask her politely to go along with the destruction of Ganitriul? Don't be ridiculous. She had to die. Same way my brother clergy had to die. Revolutions don't succeed if the people you're revolting against remain breathing. Undlar closed his eyes and once again relived the death of the other priest in his mind's eye. He had so enjoyed killing those self-righteous imbeciles. Besides, he said, reopening his eyes, the role of naive young priest was getting tiresome. Imara blinked several times. You killed the priests? Well, of course. It's no good destroying Ganitriul if the people who know how to fix it are still up and about. Besides, he added with a grin, it was so much easier to convince the speakers that this ship was built with the clergy's authorization when I was the only clergy left alive to verify it. Now then, unless you have any other tiresome questions, I'd like to get on with this before that Starfleet ship comes back. Or worse, brings friends. Contact the surface. I need to know if Haggy has neutralized whatever team Starfleet sent down. Imara looked at Undlar. I'm the owner of this ship, Undlar, not you. You don't give me orders. Undlar moved closer to Imara and unsheathed his blade, which was still blue with Ansid's blood. In a low, calm voice, Undlar said, I hired you, Imara, and I'm the one who paid to have your precious ship equipped with non-Ganitriul components. Right now, you've got the only working vessel in the system. I think, therefore, that you should modify your tone before you join the first speaker. Now, I repeat, contact the surface. Continuing to glare at Undlar, Imara reached back and opened a channel. Send Balma to Hagi. After a moment, a voice replied, Hagi. This is Undlar, the priest said, resheathing his weapon. We're proceeding mostly according to plan. Apparently, Ganitriul called for help from the Federation, and they sent one of their starships to try to fix our great one. We took care of the ship, but they sent people to the surface. I know, Hagi said. We found them at the main terminal, but they got away. We wounded one before the security protocol kicked in and neutralized the blasters. Luckily, we've got the blades, and all they've got are useless energy weapons. They're outnumbered by more than 2 to 1. They should be dead soon. Excellent. I will join you shortly. I wouldn't recommend that, Undlar. The security systems are going completely haywire. Well, of course they are. Ganitriul itself is haywire. That was the point of the exercise. Undlar said slowly, as if talking to a small child. Yes, but if you transport down and a security shield chooses that moment to activate, you could wind up scattered to the solar winds. Undlar sighed. He hadn't thought of that. We'll have to land then. I'm afraid not, Imara said. One of those torpedoes the Vinci hit us with damaged our landing gear. We can only land with a tow, which is impossible since, as you so kindly pointed out, we're the only working ship in the system. Well, except for the Vinci, but if they do come back, I doubt they're going to be accommodating enough to help us land. Growling, Undlar said, Fine. Hagi, let me know as soon as you've killed the Starfleeters. I will. Hagi out. Imara returned to Undlar. If you don't mind, will you please do something with the first speaker's body? Undlar blinked his lower eyelids. Excuse me? I don't like dead bodies on my flight deck. Remove it. What am I supposed to do with it? Dispose of it. Undlar's face twisted. He took great pleasure in killing, but the idea of touching a dead body? I can't do that. You're the one who killed her, Undlar. If you're squeamish about touching the body, well, you should have thought of that before you killed her. Now get that body off my flight deck. Imara stared hard, right at Undlar. The priest was sorely tempted to slice open the ship owner's neck, but that would be foolish. The Simbalma only had a crew of 2, and if he killed Imara, Undlar would probably have to kill the pilot too. And Undlar hadn't the first clue how to fly one of these things. His specialty was computers, after all. It was why, among all the purists, he had been the one chosen to infiltrate the clergy and infect Ganitriul. Very well, he finally said, and fighting down his revulsion, he dragged Ansed's limp corpse off the flight deck. Hagi backed up against the wall, counted to 6, and then whirled around, swinging his blade upward in order to catch any humans that might be there in the chest. There was nobody in the cavern. Clear, he said to Yanasa. This is ridiculous, Yanasa said. If we had proper scanners, they wouldn't work anyhow, Hagi said. They'd be tied into Ganitriul. Besides, the whole point is to get away from all this dependence on technology. This is the way it should be. Searching on foot, with a blade in your hands, only relying on your own instincts. Yanasa sighed, scratching the side of her head. I still wish we had a scanner. Don't worry, we'll find them. There's a dozen of us, and we know these caverns better than they do. Hagi was cut off by a sudden jolt and an invisible force impeding his forward progress. What the? He took a step back, then gingerly reached forward. His finger tingled with the feeling of a force field, and he pulled it back. Damn it, let's go back, he said, turning around. But Yanasa was shaking her head. No luck, she said, performing the same action and also touching a force field. We're trapped. Yes, Yanasa said, sounding annoyed. We're trapped. So what do your instincts tell us to do now? I don't appreciate your tone, Yanasa. I don't appreciate being stuck in a cavern on a moon with a malfunctioning computer. I said from the beginning that it was stupid to leave people here for precisely this reason, but I was outvoted. First of all, we needed to secure the location in case something like this happened. Unscheduled civilian and alien ships come to the moon all the time, and one might have been on its way here when Ganitriul went down. We had to be here to stop them. Secondly, the security measures are constantly flipping on and off. The force field will come down eventually. Yanasa rolled her eyes. And then what? The Starfleet people are hitting the same problems we are, only they don't know the caverns, and they're unarmed, except those useless rifles of theirs. Did it occur to you, Hagi, that the same security measure that deactivated their weapons may also flip off? Hagi found himself fighting the urge to take his blade to Yanasa's throat. Impatiently, he said, in that case, our blasters will work as well, and we'll still outnumber them. Something else you probably didn't think of, Hagi. The Starfleet people have working scanners, and all the people on their team had gold trim on their uniforms. Now it was Hagi's turn to roll his eyes. I wasn't aware you were such an observer of fashion, Yanasa. You really are an idiot, aren't you? Turning angrily on Yanasa, Haggy said, I warned you to watch gold trim on a Starfleet uniform, Yanasa continued calmly as if Haggy hadn't spoken, means either operations or security, which means the people here are either technicians or experts in doing things like roaming around unfamiliar caverns. These people are professionals. Yes, we are, said a voice from behind Haggy. He turned around to see a tall human woman with blonde fuzz atop her head. She stood on the other side of the force field from Haggy and was aiming her weapon at him. Haggy laughed. If that's supposed to scare me, human, it's not working. That thing in your hands is useless. To demonstrate his point, he took out his own blaster and pressed the trigger. Nothing happened. And even if it did work, it can't fire through this force field. The human just smiled. Ganitriul, she said, lower the force field. With a sharp glow, the force field dissipated. Before Haggy could move to charge at the human, an amber beam fired from the weapon and struck Haggy square in the chest. All at once, his nerve endings flared up as if he'd been jolted with a massive electrical discharge, and then went dead. He fell to the cavern floor, but felt no impact. He saw another beam go over his head, which he assumed hit Yanasa. How did she do that? He wondered, but could not say aloud. His mouth wouldn't work right. All clear, Commander, he heard the human's voice say. 2 down, 10 to go. Another voice said, Good work, Corsi. Encouraged, Haggy thought, they've only got the 2 of us. The others will stop them, I'm sure of it. The human woman stood over him now. She was still smiling. She aimed her weapon at his chest and fired. Sonia watched as Corsi checked over the 2 Eerlik. They're both out for the time being, Corsi said, but I have no idea how long they'll stay that way. Unfortunately, we don't have anything to tie them up with. Smiling, Sonia said, we'll just have to hope that we can get to the core before they wake up. Corsi got up from her kneeling position and started to walk toward Sonia when her tricorder beeped. Sonia's did likewise, and she checked it. Ganitriul, why did you put the force fields back up? I did not. Corsi had stopped walking and was looking with annoyance at the ceiling. Well, something did. I'm trapped here. I'm afraid that there is nothing I can do, Lieutenant Commander Corsi. I am sorry. Behind Sonia, Drew said, We can't just leave her here. Sonia looked at Corsi, who simply stared back with her steely blue eyes. She knew that look. We don't have a choice, Sonia said to Drew. We can't afford to waste time trying to get the force field down. We have a mission to accomplish. But you heard the commander, Corsi said, interrupting Drew before he could argue further. I'll be fine here. Just get down to the core. That's the main thing. Drew sighed. Yes, sir. Giving Corsi a significant glance, Sonia said, We will be back for you, Domenica. Smiling a lopsided smile, Corsi said, I'll hold you to that, Commander. Amused at Corsi's inability to be casual, even when prompted not to be by a superior officer, Sonia gave the security chief one last encouraging smile, then led Drew back to where they'd left 110 to care for Hawkins. Let's get moving, she said. Where is Lieutenant Commander Corsi? 110 said. She got stuck behind a force field. We don't have time to get her out, so we're proceeding. As Drew helped him to his feet, Hawkins said, We can't just leave her. That's what I said, but Core Breach herself overrode us, Drew said with a smile. Sonia set her mouth tightly. Mr. Drew, I gave the order to leave Commander Corsi behind. That's because, in case you've lost track of the chain of command, I'm in charge of this mission. Are we clear on this? Swallowing, Drew said, Yes, sir. Good. Now let's get moving. 110 was studying his tricorder. We need to go 20 meters down this corridor and then climb down a service ladder. That will lead to another corridor. None of the Eerlik patrols are in that area. Nodding, Sonia said, Good. It's about time something went smoothly today. They walked in silence, Sonia leading the way, 110 right behind her. Hawkins moving semi-steadily next to the binar, and Drew bringing up the rear. They reached the ladder without incident, and then started to climb down. Sonia reached the bottom of the ladder, followed quickly by 110 and Hawkins. Then a bulkhead closed between Hawkins and Drew, cutting the ladder off from the other 3. Quickly tapping her comm badge, Sonia said, Go, Mr. Drew. I'm okay, Commander. It kind of caught me by surprise. Did another bulkhead open on top of the ladder? Yeah, one did. I'll try to cut through. Looking at her tricorder, Sonia said, That'll never work. You can only get light stun on the rifles. This bulkhead's made of rhodinium. Damn. Ganitriul, is there any air being pumped in there? There are no air vents in the section the crew person Drew is presently stuck in. However, there is enough air to last him approximately 3 hours and 17 minutes. Drew, Sonia started. It's okay, Commander, Drew said. I'll be fine. Maybe the bulkheads will open up again. Maybe the scattering field will go down, or maybe I'll get through some other way. You just get to the core. And hey, Vance! Hawkins said, Yeah, Steve? Keep an eye on him, huh? Snorting, Hawkins said, Don't talk, pal. You'll just waste air. I know that's hard for you, but do your best. Hardy har har. Commander, 110 said, there is an Eerlik patrol moving in this direction. It behooves us to continue forward. Nodding, Sonia said, stiff upper lip, Drew. We'll be back for you. Ganitriul spoke. Commander Gomez, I do apologize for this turn of events. It's not your fault, Ganitriul, Sonia said soothingly. Listen to me, trying to calm down an inanimate object. However, the computer continued, I do have good news. The patrol that is heading your way is presently coming down another ladder. They are now trapped in the same manner as Crewperson Drew. Assuming the bulkheads do not raise without my consent, which is a possibility, they will remain trapped. That just leaves 8 of them, Sonia said. And 3 of us, Hawkins muttered. Hoping her smile was as encouraging as she intended it to be, Sonia said, it beats 12 against 5, Hawkins. Come on, let's move. They continued on in silence for several minutes, 110 providing directions toward the core. Many of the walls, like the cul-de-sac where they'd taken refuge earlier, were occupied by dusty, marble-like interfaces. According to the schematics, this section used to house the weather control systems and was heavily used up until about a century earlier. Then it was consolidated into a smaller system located 1 level up. Commander Gomez, Ganitriul said, I have more good news. Well, that's a nice change, Sonia muttered. What is it, Ganitriul? I have regained control of Security Measure 7. I can deactivate the scattering field now. Before Sonia could tell Ganitriul to go ahead and do so, Hawkins said, Commander, I don't think we should do that. Frowning, Sonia asked, why not? Right now, we've got the advantage. Even with light stun, we're better armed than the Eerlik, even with inferior numbers. If we turn the scattering field off, we lose that because they'll be just as well armed. Good point, Sonia said with a nod. She thought a moment. Ganitriul, is there any way to change the frequency of the scattering field so it will only affect the Eerlik blasters but not our phasers? I might be able to. I will attempt to adjust the field. Okay, in the meantime, leave it on. She turned to Hawkins. Good work, Hawkins. No problem, sir, the security guard said with a tired smile. Just doing what Core Breach had wanted me to do. Keeping us all alive. Hawkins' dark skin had gone almost gray for a while, but he seemed to be getting his energy back up. Whatever was in the medikit seemed to have done the trick. Still, his left arm hung uselessly at his side while he carried the rifle with his right. Sonia hoped he'd be able to fill Corsi's mandate if and when things got down to the nitty-gritty. 110 had never been more miserable in his life, and he had cursed Bart Falwell for talking him into agreeing to sit in on the meeting. He should not have come on this mission. He should have just stayed in his quarters and tried to figure out what to do when he got back to Binus. Instead, he was walking through a strange corridor, stumbling really, as he kept expecting 111 to be by his side. He wondered if he would ever be able to adjust to walking alone, being pursued by people trying to kill him in order to reach a destination, at which point he would be required to, as humans put it, save the day. And he didn't know if he could. The feeling did not sit well with him at all. 110's entire life had been defined by computers. He understood them, lived them, breathed them, knew them in a way no non-binar could ever truly comprehend. Or, more to the point, he and 111 did. Without her, he suddenly doubted his own instincts. Always in the past, they had checked each other, each constantly confirming the other's work, providing a comforting redundancy that made them so much more efficient. With her, he would have instantly known what was wrong with Ganitriul, and quite possibly have been able to fix it without requiring access to the central core, though that, in all likelihood, would have been safer in any event. Now, though, he could not even be completely sure if his diagnostic was correct. That had never happened before. He wondered if this was how the Eerlik felt when Ganitriul malfunctioned, to suddenly have all the order and sense of your life be taken away from you. His tricorder beeped. Gazing at the readout, he said, Commander, I am reading a force field around this corner. As they turned the corner, they saw what the tricorder read. Great, Gomez said. Any way around this? 110 studied the map of the caverns. There is an alternate route, but it will add an hour to our travel time. In addition, 2 of the Eerlik patrols are on that route. This is the most direct way to the core, and it is presently free of any of our pursuers. Ganitriul, can you release this force field? I can, but at the moment the force field is holding back a gas that will render all of you unconscious. I have been unable to vent the gas, which is why I put up the force fields. Damn. 110 asked, Ganitriul, is there a manual override to the ventilation system? Yes, there is. Would you like me to show it to you? Please, 110 said. 110 heard Hawkins mutter, why the hell couldn't it mention that sooner, as a small panel opened up in the floor. Gomez smiled at the security guard and said, Guy, go. Excuse me? Garbage in, garbage out. Old saying about computers. They're only as good as what you put into them. Kind of a nice reminder that Ganitriul, for all its sophistication, is still a machine. It didn't volunteer the information about the manual override because we didn't ask. Meanwhile, 110 got down on his hands and knees and peered into the manual override. Its operation was fairly complex, but his interaction with Ganitriul earlier served him well. He knew his way around the supercomputer's systems now. He started entering the codes that would allow access to the override controls. As he worked, the force fields went down. The air turned quickly into an odd shade of green as the gas that the force fields had held in check started to spread throughout the cavern. His vision swimming, 110 worked frantically at the console, fighting against unconsciousness. Chapter 8. Talk to me, boys and girls. Unlike the casual atmosphere of the meeting that morning, David Gold thought the tension in the briefing room of the Vinci now was thick enough to cut with one of Rachel's boning knives. Gold sat once again at the head of the table, with LaForge and Duffy on either side of him. Abramowitz and Falwell next to Duffy, Dr. Elizabeth Lenz and Stevens next to LaForge, and Blue in her usual seat at the other end. We got the shields back online, Duffy said, but I don't know how long they'll last. Stevens put in, I've never seen anything quite like that weapon they use. I've gone over the sensor data 3 times, so has Commander LaForge, he said with a nod to the officer. We can't figure out why it knocked out our shields. I have some guesses as to how to defend against it, LaForge added, but until we actually get shot at again by them, I don't have any idea if it'll work. Gold leaned back and sighed. So basically, we're defenseless. What about weapons? They're all fine, Duffy said. We had to reroute half the... Bridge to Captain! Gold looked up. Go ahead, McAllen. Sir, the Sugihara is in the midst of a rescue operation of their own. Apparently there's a Talarian freighter whose warp core went critical. They're going to try to finish up as fast as possible, but the soonest they can get here is in 12 hours. Damn. All right, McAllen, tell them to do the best they can. Gold out. He looked around the table. All right, people, you're supposed to be the cream of Starfleet's engineering crop. Let's have some ideas. Actually, Carol, Fabian, and I have come up with something, sir, Falwell said. Don't keep us in suspense, man. Out with it, Gold said when the linguist hesitated. Well, sir, the Sinbalma has a very simple computer system. Since it's not linked to Ganitriul, it was constructed from scratch, and their cryptography is basically non-existent. Abramowitz added, It's a cultural bias, actually. Since every computer system is linked to every other computer system, they never really had to develop any kind of external computer security, since it's all one machine. Right. So, I think I can write up a program, Falwell said, that will break into their ship's computer pretty easily. I was able to get some pretty detailed sensor readings when we were talking to them, and, well, not to gloat or anything, sir, but I'd have a harder time hacking into an old 21st century mainframe. A lot of their subsystems aren't even encoded. Stephen said, the program works pretty fast. We'd need to get within communications range, but with Bart's program, I can probably get access to their control systems in about a minute, and then we can run the ship from here. 1 minute will be pushing it, LaForge said, especially since they'll see us coming as soon as we leave orbit around this planet, and we won't be in comm range for a good 30 seconds. And it's up to you and Duffy to hold us together, Commander, Gold said. He stood up. Let's do it, people. As everyone filed out of the room, Gold stopped Lenz briefly. With any luck, we won't need your services, Doctor. Lenz waited until the room had cleared of everyone but herself and Gold before saying, in a somewhat bitter tone, Let's hope for luck, then. I did join this ship to get away from combat medicine. I know. We'll do our best, he said in as reassuring a voice as possible. It seemed to work as Lenz nodded and said, I know you will, sir. I'll go get sickbay ready. Domenica Corsi watched as the Eerlik woman started to stir. Aiming her phaser rifle at the woman's head, Corsi said, I'd suggest not making any sudden movements, or you go back to sleep. Sitting up slowly, the woman said, Don't worry, I'm not eager to get shot at again. How'd you do that, anyhow? What? Shoot me. I thought weapons were deactivated. Smiling, Corsi said, Oh, they are. Well, yours are. Obviously. Our equipment is better than yours. The woman shook her head and laughed. You Starfleet types. Everything has to be bigger with you, doesn't it? Corsi couldn't help but laugh at that. Maybe. So why are you still here? Wasn't given a choice. She reached behind where she was standing, never taking her eyes off the woman, and tapped the force field. These kicked in after I took you two down. Ganitriul can't lower them. So you don't have control of Ganitriul? The woman sounded surprised, and Corsi cursed herself for giving that away. Then again, there was no other reason for Corsi to have trapped herself behind two force fields, so she would have figured it out before long. Aloud, she said, Ganitriul doesn't have control of Ganitriul. You folks saw to that. Yeah, we did. And it's working. The Eerlik are finding out what it's like to live instead of having everything handed to them. Corsi rolled her eyes. If you're going to start spouting rhetoric, I'm going to shoot you again. To Corsi's surprise, the woman actually looked contrite. Sorry. Occupational hazard when you hang around with fanatics. So why hang around with them? I wonder that sometimes, especially when they pull dumb moves like this. Corsi frowned, but inwardly she smiled. This is the best way to gather intelligence. Casual conversation, don't let the subject know she's being interrogated. Like what? Leaving people here in the middle of a computer complex that's falling apart at the seams on the off chance that someone might come by was not the brightest of moves. Wasn't that off a chance? After all, we came by. Yeah, but we're just as trapped in here as you are. Actually, we're more trapped. Your scanners and weapons work. Corsi nodded. Bad tactics. Yeah, well, us fanatics don't always think things through, the woman said with a bitter chuckle. I'm Yanasa, by the way. I'm the person holding the rifle. Pleased to meet you. Corsi saw no reason to give Yanasa any more information than was needed. Okay, rifle woman, what's the plan? The plan is you don't move until I tell you to. That's it? That's the only part that concerns you. A beeping noise filled the air, and then a voice said, Zimbalma de Hagi. Yanasa looked at the still slumbering form of her comrade, from whose belt the voice was emitting. Hagi, this is Undlar. Answer me, damn it! Said a different voice. Corsi mouthed the words, Don't touch it, to Yanasa, who obligingly didn't move. Something must have happened to him, said the first voice. Close the channel, Undlar said. Hagi's got the only comm unit. We may have to beam down. Then it cut off. Corsi sighed. She had been hoping they might say something about the Da Vinci before they cut off communications, but that would have been too convenient. Only one comm unit? That wasn't very bright, Corsi said. We only had one hand unit that wasn't tied into Ganitriul, Yanasa said. I wanted to wait until we had enough units for everyone, but like every sensible suggestion I made, I was outvoted. She indicated Hagi with her head. Why is he still out if I'm up? Not seeing any harm in answering that question, Corsi said. Different people react to stun different ways. You probably got a faster metabolism than him or something. Well, you should be grateful, rifle woman, because Hagi's the field leader of this merry bunch, and he'd give you more rhetoric than you know what to do with. Lieutenant Commander Corsi, said Ganitriul, I have successfully altered the settings on the scattering field. The Eerlik weapons still do not function, but your phaser rifles should now function as normal. Thank you, Ganitriul. Corsi turned to Yanasa and then smiled. As she did so, she adjusted the rifle to the heavy stun setting. Yanasa was just shaking her head. We weren't expecting this. It never occurred to any of us that Ganitriul would actually work against us. I had thought that it wouldn't function at all, but I guess they underestimated that personality. I honestly had thought it was just an interface, not a separate AI personality unto itself. Oh, God, not another one who runs off about engineering minutiae at the drop of a hat, Corsi thought. She almost would have preferred the rhetoric. She got enough of this on the Da Vinci. Just then, the force fields went down. Without even hesitating, Corsi fired on Yanasa. She crumpled to the ground. Hagi started to stir. Corsi fired on him, too, and he was still. That ought to keep them out for a while, she thought. She tapped her comm badge. Corsi to Gomez. No one answered. To be continued next week. Or to be concluded, actually, next week. Next week will be the last bit of Fatal Error. Thank you very much for watching. You can get the Starfleet Corps of Engineers series as ebooks individually, and there are also collections. Like this one was Have Tech Will Travel, which connected the first 4 novelettes that we did. And then there are a bunch of mass market books that collected 4 each. And then we switched to trade paperback, and they collected anywhere between 4 and 7 novelettes, depending. So do check that out. You can find me online at DeCandido.net. You can go to my blog at DeCandido.wordpress.com. And as I said at the top of the reading, please check me out on Patreon and try to support me there. Patreon.com/KRAD. Thanks. Stay safe. Bye.